We are back again with an episode of your favorite Dynasty Fantasy Baseball podcast, the On Deck Circle, brought to you by the Fantasy Six Pack. I am your handsome, with new glasses, kind of Harry Potter, but it's kind of what I'm going for, host, Nick Zanaboni. You can call me at Nick Z. You can call me whatever you want, as long as it's kind of nice, because my mom and sometimes my cousins watch this show. You can find me on Twitter at nzanaboni93. And Jason, come on in. I have a question for you.
What's up, Nick?
What's up, Jason? Jason, I need your honest opinion. So, as some of you guys know, we are in TGFBI, and I'm announcing my picks instead of the usual GIF with pictures drawn by my students.
I saw this.
So each pick, and now there's like a thing, like, because I announced it to the whole class, and I was like, all right, so like this is what I'm doing for this draft. And they said to me, can I do the next one? Can I do the next one? And the first one was done by me, and it was really bad. Yeah. The second one was done by my boy Sam, who did like an okay job. But then my last one.
Today's, I commented on it. It was awesome.
Today's was done by my girl Samantha. I don't know if so. I drafted Tommy Edman, and this is Tommy Edman. Fabulous job. And then right after Tommy Edman, we had Alex Bregman.
Another stellar drawings.
Bang up drop. I think I might just have to have her do it. And now they're fighting with each other about who gets the most likes.
Yeah, you got to spread it around. Let more people keep doing it. Can't have one person do it.
Yeah,
all of them partake.
So far, Sam with my Raziel Iglesias and Matt Olson picture.
That one was good too.
But I think Samantha needs some more. So if you guys are watching, somebody please give Samantha some more likes. But I guess we'll bring Dave in, somebody that gets no likes on Twitter because he is. Hello, Dave.
I don't even have a Twitter.
Really?
Yeah.
No, you fucking do. I was just
what?
Dude, I didn't know that you were doing the drawings and stuff. I just looked at it real quick while you were talking about it. That's a cool idea, man.
Yeah, I like that.
I love how the kids are getting into it. Like, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, so I'm growing the game of baseball more than Rob Manfred is today.
Yes, no doubt. My toilet is drawing more baseball fans than Rob Manfred is. But I mean, let's get into this. Got another great guest this week. I don't know. I guess I could easily argue this may be the most knowledgeable guy that I know in the entire industry, and I know he'll be too humble to admit that, but I can say it for him. So let's go ahead and bring in our guest this week. He is from Baseball America. Of course, it is Mr. Geoff Pontes. How you doing, Geoff?
What's going on, guys? Happy to join you, man. Thanks for having me on.
We're happy to have you. Like I said, man, most knowledgeable guy that I know. It's just true. Probably in the top 3 for most handsome currently on air. Obviously, Nick is number 1. And then we can flip a coin for the rest of us. I'm the only one not wearing a hat, so I don't know if that gives me an advantage or disadvantage.
Probably a disadvantage potentially. My hair is very messy, so I could just take it off.
I need to borrow some of that, Geoff. If you wanted to slice it up and send it this way, man.
I've been lucky. It didn't all disappear. I thought it was going to. Not so far, so good.
Not yet.
No.
Well, hey, man, absolute pleasure having you on. Want to give you the floor for just a minute if you want to go ahead and, plug anything or tell people a little bit about yourself. I don't know who wouldn't know you that watches this, but you never do know.
Yeah, I'm well known for having played several years of youth hockey with Nick's cousin, actually, Billy.
Bill.
Yes.
Yep.
He was a very good goalie on my youth hockey team, rival hockey team.
He coaches now somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. He was very good. Yeah. Well-known hockey player in the Massachusetts area. His cousin. So I thought it was funny when I saw he was on the show list. I was like, it's crazy, man. It's been a long time. I was probably 14 the last time I saw your cousin. Anyway,
that's funny.
But as for who I am, now at Baseball America, I'm a prospect writer. Prior to that, I initially started at Rasball back in like 2014. Took over prospects for them around that time. Did that until about 2018, and I got not less interested in the fantasy side of things, but more interested in sort of the real baseball scouting side of stuff. So me and a couple other folks started Prospects Live, what's still Prospects Live now. I just left there in November when I took a full-time role with Baseball America, but was involved with building up the site, building up our content over there, the draft team, sort of the scouting focus at that point, trying to blend that in with fantasy and a million other things. And I've kind of gotten really more into like the analytics side of things, particularly on like ball flight, being able to read data, understand data. It was less trying to be a quant, honestly, and more just being in scouting sections, being next to the trackman at games, whether it was on the Cape or minor league parks, and wanting to be able to look at the numbers and be able to like fluently understand it as I'm seeing something, and then be like, all right, I can jot that down and know what it means. You know what I mean? Or watching how it translates to motions and things that you actually see players doing. Whether it's in the pitching side is probably the stuff, because there's so many there's so much to dig in on. There's so many layers to pitching and being successful. I think I probably spend more time on it. But hitting, it's obviously the same thing. It's just, it's kind of see ball, hit ball. Do you swing at bad pitches? Do you not swing at bad pitches? It's a little bit, it's a little bit more straightforward. But so I've spent a lot of time doing that since I've come over to Baseball America. I'll be out at, parks all season long. I'll be down in spring training, actually, to cover the St. Louis Cardinals, which I know is one of the teams that we're going to be talking about today. So that's appropriate. But yeah, so really just a guy that loved baseball and got into writing about it. And, I've been fortunate enough to find a full-time role writing and recording and doing things with baseball, which, honestly, like even 7-8 months ago, I didn't think that was ever going to happen. So,
well, I'll tell you what, man. My first thought whenever I saw that you had moved to Baseball America, and you can answer this question or you can refrain from answering it. I don't know. Maybe this hasn't even been a thought of yours, but my first thought when I saw that was, this feels to me like a stepping stone for Geoff working towards, getting employed with a major league team. Is that something that's in your mind? Not anything you've thought about or plead the fifth?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. I entertained it in the fall. But here's the thing, and I think this is something we fantasize about: scouting jobs and working for major league teams and being an analyst. And I've been fortunate enough that a lot of folks that I've worked with and a lot of folks that work for my old site, been able to get jobs. One recently, Joe Drake, who's one of my best friends in the world, got hired by one of my favorite organizations, the Orioles. So that was bittersweet. But I think what you see is, number one, there's a premium on those positions. So it's hard to break in from the outside on a full-time basis at a level that you would be able to sustain. I got 3 kids, I got a mortgage, all that sort of thing. But it's a lot of work. I mean, you could be, if I get a New England where I'm based out, if I get an area scouting job, I'm pretty much covering Maine to New York City, and then everything in between. And it's not like there's a heavy concentration of players within, like in Florida, the Miami area. And so there's like a southern, Florida scout, a northern Florida scout, and a western, you know what I mean? So like I'm covering like a huge geographic area and, having to travel, and I mean, the thing is, you're not, especially in an area like this, you're not chasing first round picks most of the time. Like you're chasing guys, rounds 15 to 20 and maybe UDFAs afterward. And that's really what you're making your bank off of. So it's more glamorous, I think, for a lot of us that are like, I want to be able to identify players and have a guy sign and have him, work his way through a system and then contribute to a major league team or maybe to a championship major league team. Like, right. That's really what the goal is. But I think it's just the amount of time it takes and the sacrifices those guys have to make from like a personal life standpoint. I don't think like I'm personally at that point yet. And the other side of it is Baseball America is amazing. Like, I can't say it enough. Like, it's funny. I don't even know if I've said this to JJ, but JJ Cooper is like, more or less the boss. But like him and Matt, it's like working for like, Ted Lasso and Coach Beard or something. Like they're so positive, and like I was in sales for 16 years prior to this, and if you know sales, I mean it's as competitive, and people aren't nice to each other. It's just not positive, right? There's a lot of negative all the time, and yeah, man, it's been like a cleanse for my soul, just being able to like work with great people who are great at what they do, who value my opinion, and, are really collaborative. And I think that's the biggest thing that I noticed with BA is like how collaborative they were. Not to say like Prospects Live wasn't, but we were all pulled in different directions. We had full-time jobs, and we did this as a passion and put in a ton of effort. But, there's schedule and things like that. That it's, like when we do the top 100, it's like multiple 3-hour calls where we're there going through like every player, we're stumping for players, and there's a really involved process of going back and forth between team contacts and a lot of that stuff. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about writing, and it's so I think that long answer, right? But I think it's something that when my kids, my oldest son's 11, my daughter's 8, my youngest son is 6. When my kids are in college or older, 12 years from now. Then it would be something that I'd be interested in. And I think like for me, it'd be more like I'd want to move to Arizona and scout the complex. I'd want to move to California and work Southern California. I don't really want to be up here. I want to get out of the cold.
Yeah.
I want to be around baseball in December and January, kind of. Like that's where my head's at now.
For sure.
We're like I'm Northeastern guy, so it's like 5-6 years ago, I was like, I like the cold. Screw that. I want baseball year round, man. I was in Arizona in November, and it was like, it could be like this all the time. This could be my life,
Yeah, no doubt, right? All right, let's move into our Dynasty deep dive here. Like Jeff said, we're doing the Cardinals. And fun little backstory, Jeff. I had actually chosen the Cardinals as a team that, we were going to do. But I wanted to reach out to you and see what you thought. And you had said, well, how about the Cardinals? And I was like, well, okay, that'll work. We were already on that plane. So it was funny that was a team that you had selected. But the way that this works is we kind of try to go through this a little bit quick. It's called the Dynasty Deep Dive, but it's no longer so deep. What we do is one of us is going to take a hitter. One of us is going to take a pitcher. I'm going to take a prospect. We're going to, give an opinion on it real quick. And then mostly, Jeff, we just want to hear what you think, and then we'll move on. All right. And then we'll follow that up with some, 2020 fantasy baseball players that we think could surprise in a positive way. And we'll round out the show that way. So I think Nick is going to go first here, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about your pitcher, Nick.
Nope. I'm on pitcher.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. So what do I know?
It's okay. It was a last minute change, but yeah. I'm going to go ahead and talk about Alex Reyes. After what seems like, waiting around him for forever, we finally get a full season out of Reyes in 2021 after many, many seasons of injured Reyes. But yeah, he finished the season with 29 saves last year, which was 10th most in all of baseball. Once he moved to the bullpen actually in 2021, it really started to find his stride. One of it was helping limit the innings, which would maybe cut down on those injury risks. He did have 72 innings pitched, was actually a career high as far as the major leagues go. He does throw an elite slider. He throws it down and in the righties, backdoors it to the lefties. He managed a 56% whiff rate on that slider and also a 43% put away rate. So obviously that you could tell that that's a good pitch for him, secondary pitch. There's been talks that the Cardinals do want to give him another chance at the starting rotation. I don't know if necessarily that's something that should be happening. You don't want to say he's just injury prone every year. Just because he gets injured every year doesn't mean he is going to get injured again. But I think he's more suited better for the bullpen, and it's also in those high leverage situations. So that's going to give him more value in those dynasty saves and holds leagues, because if he's not closing, I know people think that maybe Gallegos might be the closer going into the season this year too. Could split, could be a committee between him and Reyes, but I think if you're in a saves and hold league, I mean, Reyes is a bright spot. Still only 27 or maybe 24. I can't remember, but still on the younger side. So I think it's a good outlook for him.
Go ahead and run with it, Jeff. What do you think about Alex Reyes?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that they're thinking about, potentially moving him to the starting rotation, which, would be interesting. I mean, the thing about Reyes is I think, a big part of it was obviously health. But when he sort of went to a primary sweeper sort of slider as his primary breaking ball versus that big hammer, 12-6 curveball that he had, it paid dividends. He still throws the hammer. He still throws the 12-6 curveball, but it gets beat up pretty badly. And I think it's just indicative of the way like curveballs have kind of gone, especially like, up and down vertical curveballs have kind of gone over the last couple of years. The guys are just teeing off on him. And it has, I mean, it's one of those pitches that if you look at the data, you look at the movement, I think it has like a -20 IVB. I mean, it's just insane drop. It's like top of the scale drop, but it's easy to catch that out of the hands. It's typically a hump on a pitch like that because you got to sort of release it at a certain higher point to be able to get that sort of downward break, right? The thing with him too is he throws a sinker. I think you should ditch it. Like if he goes to four-seamer, slider, works in the changeup, and maybe like uses the curveball and early counts to like steal pitches and get ahead, keep guys, change eye levels, that sort of thing. I think he could be a successful starter. I don't know what the Cardinals plan on doing there. Certainly he wouldn't be the first guy that sort of, we'll say got a little tread, worn off the tires in the pen and then, was moved to the rotation and was successful. There's been guys, especially that are high power, that had command issues and health issues that have done that. So I think it'd be really interesting if he does. He certainly has the pitch mix to make it happen. I mean, he's not like a two-pitch kind of a guy where you're like, you want to limit him and he's really only better in, inning or two sort of stints. But I mean, it's great to see it. I mean, because he's one of those really frustrating prospects where I don't know if you realize it, when he got hurt the last time, he was like 1 out away from no longer being a prospect. So he got hurt. I remember listening to it on the radio. I was like on my way to a sales call in like the North Shore of Massachusetts, and like remember like listening to it on MLB radio. He gets injured, and it was like, oh crap, he's only at 50 innings, so he's right at that threshold where he's a prospect now for another 18 months. So it was good to see him come back and be a prominent member of that bullpen. I figured they would just let it ride and he'd be the starter, and they use Gallegos as sort of the fireman, a situational high leverage guy. But maybe this means he's overtaken him. I don't know. Because I know they have him, and then who was the other reliever that they're thinking about stretching out? Hicks. Yeah, which totally shocked me. I was like, that doesn't. Yeah. He seems like the last guy you would turn into a starter. But
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting stuff there. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So finally, all right, Nick, let me get this correct now. Yeah. You were up for hitter, Nick.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to get this out of the way. This is actually the guy that I'm profiling this week on the Fantasy Six Pack this week. So
that's perfect.
It was a happy coincidence that I made a coincidence because you gave me him, and I said, you know what? If I'm going to look into him, I might as well talk about him.
Yeah, this has worked out great for everybody.
So Tyler Oneil, I absolutely hated this guy, despised him everywhere. I don't know why. Just you would think that I would love him because Knicks dig the long ball. But every single time somebody checked in with me like that wanted me to take Tyler Oneil, I just said no because of something that we've talked about a lot recently, which is prospect fatigue. I was just so tired of hearing about Tyler Oneil. But last year, guys, he was actually really good.
Yeah,
I was very surprised. His dad's actually a bodybuilder, which is sick. He was Mr. Canada or something like that along those lines. I got that from last week's guest. Matt Williams had a blurb about it. And he talked about how his dad was a bodybuilder. I was like, oh, my God, least surprising thing ever. But he had 34 bombs last year, stole 15 bases. It's really great. But what really struck me was he had the fourth highest OPS, only behind Tatis, Soto, and Harper. And that's That's better than elite company. That's like Hall of Fame company because all three of those guys are on track, I suppose, to make the Hall of Fame. But he's somebody that I didn't know was good that is actually good. That's my stuff. I'm sticking to it.
Tyler Oneil is like my prospect binky. Like I remember when he broke out in A-ball, and like I had him ranked 17th. So like if you're sick of Tyler Oneil, it was probably because
it's 1,000% because of you.
Yeah.
It's Taylor Trammell and Tyler Oneil. The two
I was wrong. I was wrong about Trammell for sure.
Yeah, I know.
But everybody was. Yeah, that's all right. I got off him quick though. Oneil, I've never quit. The problem is though now is it's like all the value's been completely sucked out of it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's still some scary stuff. Like I don't anticipate he's going to repeat what he did last year unless there are approach games. He doesn't walk much. It's whatever bottom quarter percentile sort of walk rate, plus 30% strikeout rate. He's got to run a fairly high batting average on balls in play, which is possible because he's strong and he's really, really fast. I think people always miss that with Oneil. They missed it as a prospect. I can remember arguing with a prominent fantasy analyst who's still around now making content about how he referred to him as a stiff, slow, muscle-bound guy. And I was like, dude, he's like a 70 runner. Like, and he's a Gold Glove outfielder.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I always liked Oneil, because I was like, the cream's going to rise to the top here. He's too good of like a baseball player skill-wise to not get 500 at-bats in a season. That finally happens. We see what happens there. He is top of the scale power. There's no question about that. He's still and the thing is that's kind of tough about Oneil is he's one of these guys where it's almost like Tatis, where like you kind of don't want him to get overly patient. You don't want him to get overly passive. There's a level of aggression in his game that sort of feeds into the production that he ultimately gets. But it's a tightrope. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you have to go in when you draft a guy like that, when you roster a player like that in your fantasy team, you have to realize that, there's a 40% chance that he really isn't going to return what you got there. Maybe even better, that it may turn out to be a guy that goes in the 11th round next year as opposed to the 3rd, right? There's always a chance with a guy like that. Now, the other side of the coin is it incrementally improves. There did seem to be, some contact gains last year in terms of some of the stuff that he was swinging on. Another year of experience, another off season. He's fully healthy for a full year. He certainly has the abilities to sort of push those numbers because he has that power and he has that speed, and just so few players, possess that combination.
Yeah, and I think everyone knows him for his power, but I mean, like you said, Jeff, I think a lot of people will be surprised that his, sprint speed is in the 98th percentile. And I think that people would look at that and think that that's an error, but it's not. And people just don't look at him that way.
Yeah.
So that's
I
definitely
found
interesting.
out that he was fast. MLB The Show. That's literally how I found out.
Whatever works, man. That's how you're scouting.
He was just like a 97 speed, and I was like, Tyler O'Neill's fast.
Yep.
Oh man. All right, let's get to the prospect here, and I'm going to cheat a little bit since we've got the prospect guru himself here. I'm going to cheat a little bit, so I'm going to give my little take on Matthew Liberatore, and then we're going to let Jeff run with it because that's what Jeff does. So, coming out in 2018, I viewed Liberatore, and I think a lot of people did, as the top high school arm, and I don't know. I've soured on him a little bit. I mean, he's still only, 22. So he's got a little room, to grow there. He's not, I'm glad he's not, 23, 24. But I just have not been impressed, specifically last year at AAA. Nothing that he really did, stood out to me. It's not like he was getting shelled or anything. But just not the kind of numbers that I would expect, coming from Liberatore. ERA just over 4, whip at 1 1/4, and basically striking out a guy an inning. that's not, the fantasy ace kind of, guy that I thought, may have been drafted in. And you guys know how I feel about, prospect pitchers. I don't trust them. So, the shimmer on him for me is a little bit down. I still think he's, obviously a good prospect. I don't view him the same way that I did when he got drafted. So Geoff, why don't you go ahead and elaborate a little bit further on Matthew Liberatore for us?
Yeah, Liberatore. So the thing with Liberatore is, he was obviously, heavily valued, I'll say, at the time of the draft. He was a guy that had potential 1-1 buzz, as often happens with the early leaders in the clubhouse and this sort of thing. that didn't come to fruition. And ultimately, what came to pass is he dropped down to 15. The Reyes signed him. I think it was 15. The Reyes signed him at an overslot number. He was the return in Randy Arozarena trade. So he's wearing that stain a little bit as well. But the thing with Liberatore is he doesn't necessarily have the sort of overpowering characteristics that you would pin on an ace, because he's not. He's really more of a mid-rotation sort of an arm. He was another guy that was a big hammer curveball guy that changed over to a slider this year. He saw really good success rates against the slider. I think he had like a 41% whiff on it. It's a pitch that's in the zone a lot, nearly 70% strike rate, which is really, really high for a slider. He's really more of, a control command kind of a pitcher that's going to get ground balls. He's going to get weak contact. He'll miss some bats, but not a ton. And a lot of that is, he doesn't have, a high ride, high spin efficiency four-seam fastball. It's not like, Garrett Cole has a fastball like that, for example. Shane Baz came right up, and because he has a fastball like that, we saw how that played. So it's a higher release point, so it's a little bit easier to pick up out of the hand. He throws a sinker a lot. Started to work in a four-seamer a little bit more toward the end of the season. He did see fairly good results on it, but he's sort of messing with two different fastballs. Neither of them, regardless of how hard he throws, it's not going to matter. It's just, he doesn't have enough ride. He'd have to throw like 100, 101 with the sort of movement that he has to miss bats with a fastball. And I mean, the numbers play that out. He had a 15% whiff rate off his four seam. Two-seamer was a little bit better. The sinker was a little bit better at, I think it was just under 16% whiff. So really, he's a guy that's going to show you, he's going to show you two different breaking balls, primarily a slider. He's got feel for a changeup. The changeup is fairly good, though it doesn't miss a lot of bats. And then he's got two different variations of the fastball. I think that one thing that he has going for him is AAA, remember, was using the juice balls last year. So you got to take some of those numbers with a grain of salt. And then the other thing is he was incredibly young for the level. He just turned 22 back in November. So he was 21 for the entirety of the season at AAA after a full season off from competition. So effectively, he kind of went from being a 19-year-old kid to being a 21-year-old in AAA. So I think with him and Gorman, you sort of got to take the aggressive assignment and sort of look at the numbers with a grain of salt. That being said, his numbers were still fairly good for a guy with such little track record in the professional level that was at the highest level of the minors with a piece of equipment that was harder to work with than the one he would work with at the major league level, right? I mean, so I think it's one of those things. I don't love Matthew Liberatore as a prospect. I don't think I've ever drafted him on a single fantasy team. And I've had plenty of opportunities to do so. I've never traded for him. So that tells you like where I view him in terms of his fantasy value. But I think on the other side of the coin, I think it's a major league starter. It's just, he's probably going to be a guy that you'll roster in your rotation in like a 15, 16 team league. He'll probably be rostered in all head-to-head formats, 12 plus points leagues, that sort of thing, where most pitchers are rostered anyway. But yeah, I mean, he's more along the lines of, a mid-rotation starter ceiling than, a potential 2 or even an ace. And there's so few of those guys.
No, I think that's good stuff, Geoff.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate it. So now what I want to move into here, and I've got a list of players that I want to run past you guys and see what you guys think. These are guys that I think at least have the potential for 2022 that could, give us a surprise season better than, maybe what the projections or maybe what the industry thinks right now. Doesn't mean that that's going to be the case, but just some interesting names that I kind of came across and just want to have a quick discussion about each on. And we'll start off with a guy that we've talked about a whole bunch, a guy that I'm much higher on than a lot of people, especially heading into 2022. And as I look through this list, I start to realize that this is a little bit of an insight into my TGFB IQ. So I hope that Corbin Young is not watching, because Corbin Young is in my league. So hopefully Corbin is not paying attention. Everyone else can follow along. That's fine. But Cavan Biggio is the first guy I want to talk about. Obviously, like I said, we've talked about him, quite a bit in the last, few weeks. But, my main thing for him is, yes, he had a down season in 2021. I think that, we've talked, about a lot of the reasons, at least in the metrics that would seem to point towards those reasons. Jesse Goldberg-Strasser, who's seen, hundreds of at-bats in Lansing with him in the minors, had a lot of good insights on him as well. So I know we've all discussed that a little bit. So I guess in this particular player's case, I'm more curious on Jeff's thoughts about, Cavan Biggio in 2022. What do you think, Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, where does Biggio play? I think is really the question, right?
Everywhere.
You got to hope. The issue is, and I mean, maybe this has improved. They're human beings. They obviously have the ability to improve. I saw a lot of Cavan Biggio in 2018. Was on that same team as Bichette, was on the same team as Vlad. Actually, Harold Ramirez was on that team too. A couple other guys, Jonathan Davis, who I think actually had some cups of coffee with the Blue Jays. But I mean, when he reworked his swing after being sort of a contact first hitter at Notre Dame, it's incredibly steep path like throughout. So I always felt like he was a guy that pitchers that can locate fastballs high are going to be able to bang them, right? Guys with sweepy sliders, like an Alex Reyes slider, something that's coming in with a lot of horizontal movement and very little tilt. Guys like that are going to bang them. And that's the way the game's going. That's the way pitching is going. And it's not a launch angle thing. It's not like, one of those like old men conversations where they complain about launch angle. It's not one of those things. It's an approach angle thing. It's in terms of like how his path is coming from up here and approaching the ball like this. And there's like this dip with his hands. And I think it's one of the reasons he's as passive as he is too. He walks a lot because he doesn't swing on a lot of pitches.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he'll take stuff down the middle of the plate, right? So as I've started to dig in more in numbers and look at more, I try to discern between guys like an Austin Martin who has an 80% heart swing rate. If you throw the ball in the middle of the plate to Austin Martin, he's going to swing on it, all right? Versus a guy like Nolan Jones, who maybe has the same walk rate as Austin Martin, but has like a 60% hard swing. So he's just taking good pitches down the middle of the plate or drivable pitches on a consistent basis. That tells me that that's someone who's overly passive as opposed to someone who's identifying the pitches that they're facing and then making quick decisions on whether to swing them or not, right? There's a plan there as opposed to being scared to attack. And I think that there's a level of Biggio that he has to operate. Like his value comes from being scared. It's one of the things that I think is wrong inherently with the way WAR is calculated is there's way too much value on walks. Like walks are great. They're awesome. I get it. All right. We're way past Moneyball. That stuff is like 20 years ago, dude. Like now the quants are looking at the Moneyball guys the way they looked, the Moneyballs guys looked at the scouts in that movie, right? That famous scene that everybody likes to bring up. It's like we're so beyond like just like walks. You have to be able to do damage. That's what's important, right? If a guy has a 9% walk rate or 14% walk rate, I don't care if the guy that has a 9% walk rate hits, 50 extra bases a year versus a guy that hits 32, but, walks whatever, 3% more of the time. Like, great. You want to be able to work counts. You want to be able to get deep in accounts, but you also want to be able to do damage. I think that's the issue with Biggio. The way that this team is set up right now, I don't know where he necessarily fits in. And I feel like there's players in the farm that, even like a Jordan Groshans is probably a better hitter than Biggio is now. He's got one of the better hit tools in the minors. He didn't hit for a lot of power last year. He dealt with some injuries. We'll see what comes back this year. But if he's a guy that can come in, hit 300, get on base, and give you solid defense at a variety of different positions, that's a better option than Biggio right now, especially for a competing team that wants, at this point, they don't need Biggio to hit 40 home runs. They need him to get hits. They need him to drive guys in. They need him to do something, and they can't have an albatross that maybe has a high walk rate but a 220 batting average in the middle of the order and a sub 400 slug. And I think that's kind of what you got to worry with. I mean, unless he's made, substantive changes, I just don't see that being the case. And it's not like he's a guy that's a standout outfielder with a big arm, but maybe just doesn't move well. So you can stick him in a corner and he gives you some value. He's kind of a mediocre to bad second baseman, that they stuck in left field because they had better options at second base. It sucks because he's the kind of guy that he's in the wrong organization. If he's in the Tigers, he probably plays every day, right? If he's in the Marlins, he probably plays every day. There's organizations where a guy like that would be valuable and would see 500 plate appearances. But at the end of the day, I think, he's probably priced appropriately for what the return potentially is. But it doesn't mean he's not a bad flyer at the end of a draft, right? I mean, things shake out, guys get injured, situations change very quickly in baseball if they play the games.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there when you talk about, teams are looking more at, like WOBA and OPS more so than, he can get on base. You know what I mean? So I think that brought up a good point.
Yep. Next guy I want to talk about here, Willy Adames. And, my main takeaway here, the reason that he's on this list is this is a guy that, always performs significantly better on the road than he did in Tampa. And I mean, the numbers are, and we've talked about this before in the past, the numbers were startling between, his road splits and his home splits. And then once he moves and gets in Milwaukee, all of a sudden we see him seemingly break out, but he's really just repeating what we've seen him do on the road. And, I'm kind of surprised at, his ADP is in like the 120-ish neighborhood. I'd have to look exactly here, but it's in like the 120-ish neighborhood. And he's a guy that I think is a fantastic target at shortstop if you don't get, an absolute elite guy right up at the top. So what do you guys think about, just Willy Adames for 2022? Am I off base here?
No, you are correct. I'm obsessed with him and Urias, actually. I don't know if that's how you say it. Yes. But just the two of them being traded to this team for some reason really worked out for both of them. I think Adames is a far better player than Urias is. But just in general, I just needed people to know that Urias is also very good.
Yeah, and I think the thing with like Urias is he's got crazy multi-position eligibility. So if you're in like cut line or something like that, any best ball format, he kind of gets a little bit of a bump up there. He's really interesting. I like Adames a lot. I'm in 112 team head-to-head points league that I've been in forever. It's like my home league. And when that trade happened, I forget I had Lindor and he was obviously scuffling at the point. I had somebody at the bottom of my bench. I dumped him immediately because I knew Adames was available on the waiver wire, and I added Adames like 5 minutes later. And it's funny, he didn't hit all that well in Miller, which is kind of surprising. But overall, the numbers were great. He had 400 plus plate appearances as a member of the Brewers, and he slashed 285, 366, 521. So that kind of tells you all you need to know right there. Good batting average, good OBP. He has power. And he's, shortstop eligible. Middle infield drops off pretty quickly after a certain tier. So he's a good grab. I like him a lot. And I think after that, that first group of shortstops, he's somebody that you could grab as a 12-team league, roto, middle infield guy, plug in there, just plug and play every single day. And he's going to see, 500, 600 at bats. And that's all you're looking for is to maximize those bats. The numbers are really good. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire in terms of counting stats with homers and steals, but he'll chip in there. He's not a zero in either. Maybe he could hit 25 homers. Maybe if we get really lucky on a fly ball to home run ratio, he gets some nice wins. Maybe he gets 30, high 20s. But that's a really valuable player, especially where he's going in drafts. I'd have to check ADP, but I'm sure he's probably right around where Glaber's going. I would take him over Glaber right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So another guy at the same position, but in a different scenario, is Oneil Cruz. And, to be fair, I'm the kind of guy in redrafts and stuff like TGFBI. For the most part, I'm never going to have, one of these breakout, kind of prospects that, have never, done it at the big league level. I just shy away from them. That's why I like a guy like a Bobby Witt. I wouldn't touch him for where he's getting drafted. Not that I don't think that they're great players. I just like to play it a little safer, and I just avoid those guys. And I think Oneil Cruz is in the same realm because, this is a massive human being, and he should get, well, again, if we're playing baseball, he should get plenty of run with the Pirates this year. And what he could do for where you could get him could be an absolute just treasure trove. But I'm going to shy away, but I don't blame anyone for taking the shot on him. So what are your guys' thoughts on, players like Oneil Cruz and Oneil Cruz, specifically?
I think, I don't know too much about the defensive side, but does he someone that can stick at shortstop? I know he's, on the larger size, and we don't really see a lot of that prototypical shortstop being, 6'5" or whatever that may be. So do we see envision?
7.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's up there. So is that something that we envision him sliding over to a corner outfielder, or is his glove something that gets short? I think that's something to consider looking at, for dynasty purposes at least.
Everything I've heard, and I'll defer to Jeff, but everything
that
I've
was
heard
question
is that he's gonna stick at shortstop. But my opinion is not nearly as important as Jeff's on this.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's got a rocket arm and he's fairly twitchy. I think that's the thing is guys that are that big that are 6'7" just typically aren't that coordinated, right? And I think it's kind of why he gets those Judge comps because Judge is like that, right? Mm-hmm. I think the thing with big guys I'm probably more concerned with than anything else is health. Those guys they don't necessarily sustain peak physical condition for a long period of time. They have a lot of bumps and bruises. You see it with Judge now, right? And it's kind of been the same with Cruz. Cruz has struggled to stay on the field for an entire season. That being said, he possesses skills and tools that you don't see many prospects with. I think the power-wise, it's up there with Judge or Stanton. He was I think he was the only guy that hit 120 or above last year in the minor leagues. Maybe one of the only guys ever. He did it multiple times. You saw what he did in that homer that he golfed out of the stadium in his second major league game. He can do stuff like that. He has insane plate coverage. He's really twitchy. He's really fast. It's almost like if Fernando Tatis Jr. was 6'7". It's kind of like that kind of a freaky athlete where he's long and lean, and there's all this wiry strength that you don't expect, but it's just that explosiveness, that twitch that he possesses that you don't see in guys that are 6'5", let alone guys that are 6'7". He's not great in terms of all of his infield actions. There's some plays going to his right from time to time. They're a little bit tough. You'll see him stretch for stuff sometimes that maybe he gets to and knocks down. There's maybe some grounders that he'll miss a little bit on. But I think, like, it's funny, JJ and I had a conversation about this a while back talking about Cruz. And it's one of those things where, like, for every grounder that he may lose because of his height, he might steal 3 balls in the air that other guys can't get to. You know what I mean? So there's a bit of a trade-off. I think that just in the nature of things, as long as they don't mess with any shifting, subsequently, if the CBA ever does get worked out, I think you could probably shift around him. He's going to have Cabrian Hayes next to him, which, if you're going to have a third baseman next to you, it's like Matt Chapman or Cabrian Hayes is probably a pretty good place. Yeah. He's got Hayes. So it could be a really interesting infield. They have a lot of good infielders across the board in that system. And then I think just from a raw power standpoint, there's 40 homer potential in that bat without a 30% strikeout rate. Like, he's a guy that probably should keep it under 30, even at the major league level. He's always been a fairly good hit tool guy. There's a baseline of approach, a baseline of bat to ball skills. And, as I said, his plate coverage is nuts. I mean, he could probably barrel stuff like, a foot off the plate just from the nature of how long his levers are. But there's a high level of risk with any player that has unprecedented size, speed, velocity on their fastball, whatever it is, right? There's challenges that maybe we haven't seen before that could come to light. So I think there's always a little bit of skepticism, and that's right. And then as for the other question, the other point that Dave made is, I tend to be a really conservative drafter, especially in the first, talking like a TGFBI league, the first 18 to 20 rounds. I like to get my foundation in. I want to make sure I have guaranteed major leaguers. I like guys that are somewhere between that, like 26 to 29, 30 age range. I think you're going to get better health, peak performance. That's when guys, contract-wise, typically are, in their big ARB years prior to a contract. They're playing for it. Their team's paying enough money, and the investment's already sunk. They want to get those guys in the field because I think all that stuff matters, right? And then I'll start to hit prospects. Like I did Raslam, and I really didn't take anybody that was a prospect until round 32, 33. And then I double tapped Pena and Barrero. I think Jeremy Pena is going to be Houston's starting shortstop this year from day one. Wow. I think Reyes is starting somewhere else. The organization has shown a ton of faith in him to the point that they pretty much said that, like, hey, Jeremy Pena, could be the guy. Not necessarily in those words, but more or less. Barrero, I think, is going to get a shot this year. So as late as I got him, it was fine. Backfield, I had sort of silos in terms of the certain number of position guys because that's a cut line format, Raslam. So I just made sure I hit certain silos. And then I hit pitchers late in the later rounds that I think, 40-man, they're on the 40-man roster. They've debuted or they've thrown at least 5 to 6 starts in AAA. Those guys could be up in a blink of an eye. We saw it with Manoah last year. So Matt Brash is one of them. I have a ton of Matt Brash everywhere. The organization thinks he can start too. They've more or less told me that. They've gone on record and said it a few times. So I think he's a guy that's worth, even if he's 5 and dive and he strikes out 9 batters or something, it's like you're going to take those Ks and you're going to bank every time, even if he's not a quality starts guy. And then I'm trying to think of a couple other starters, but I tend to like the guys at the back end that maybe don't have as much press. They're not as big of a prospect, but they're guys that could have a ton of value. I was having this conversation yesterday, but I think Nick Prado could outperform Spencer Torkelson this year in formats. And I don't even think that's hot. I think it's honestly Prado's on the 40-man and Torque isn't on the 40-man, We all assume the Tigers are going to go for it and they're going to call Torque up right away and he's going to play and hit and yada, yada, yada. But you look at the other side of it, Prado is a similar skill set. Maybe he strikes out a little bit more, but similar power. There's on base percentage and ability. I think, Kansas City at this point is probably, Carlos Santana's going to be 36 in April. He had PRP injections in his knees. He's a former catcher coming off the worst year of his career. And they have this young crop of players they want to get to the majors. And Kansas City has shown a willingness to be aggressive with their prospects. We saw it with the 2018, college pitching class they had, Lynch, Singer, Bubich. Every single one of those guys, touched the majors within a year of being drafted or whatever, So I think I have more faith in the organization pushing a guy like that. So Prado is a guy for me, you can get him in the 38th round, a lot of these drafts, and he could be a top 15 first baseman by mid-July, he has OBP, he has power, he has a lineup that could be pretty good, Melendez comes up, Mondesi's healthy. We've had some other guys that hit last year. And you bring up obviously Bobby Witt Jr. It's you could legitimately have a pretty decent Royals lineup. And he could be in the middle of that, for a lot of years. Even if he hits 230, 240, you could, have a 12% walk rate and hit 30 bombs and drive in some runs. So I feel like with prospects, if you're paying up for them, it better be Acuna. I drafted Acuna all over that year, and I don't know if I've done it since. I don't know if I've had a prospect, maybe Louis Robert. Louis Robert, I think, was maybe the only other one. Wander last year, no one expected Wander to be up that high, and I wasn't buying. As much as I liked Kelnick, I wasn't buying Kelnick in redraft just because it was at least we didn't think the Mariners were going to win 90 games. We were the team isn't competitive. I think that's a big part of it. If you have a good prospect and the team is competitive, and there's an opportunity for that player to slot in there, go after that guy, because that's a situation where all right, the Red Sox will promote Tristan Cassis if Bobby Dahlbeck blows out his knee and they don't re-sign Kyle Schwarber. I think you have to pick your spots, and I think you have to read the tea leaves. It's not just about talent. In Dynasty, it's about talent. Redraft, it's about maximizing at bats, and it's about maximizing innings, and keep an eye on the inning side.
Really good points.
Yeah, all good stuff. And we're running a little late on this one, so I think I'm going to cut it short right there. It's been fantastic information. So absolutely no issue there. But we'll save the rest of these guys maybe for a little bit later on whenever we have more filler, because the offseason will continue.
At least another week.
Oh, boy. Yeah, at least. So, Geoff, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for making the time for us again, coming back on for second time with us, this time with Nick and Jason present as well. So I want to give you the floor one final time, Geoff. Anything you want to, anything you want to talk about, anything you want to promote, anything at Baseball America that you want to talk about?
Yeah. Just, we can find all my work, all my writing over at Baseball America. You can sub. We have the prospect handbooks to be shipping soon. If you order a prospect handbook, we will send you a PDF version, a digital copy of it, which I think is probably something we may end up doing something we may end up doing going forward. Just because I think it's more actionable out in the field, but I could be at a game, I could pull up a PDF, especially if I'm not me, right? Or I'm somebody that's obsessive about prospects and lives his entire life watching baseball and looking at numbers. But if I'm just somebody who's interested in prospects, I'm at a minor league game, I see a pitcher come in, pop 95. I'm like, who is this guy? I could search his name as opposed to going to the index and trying to make sure I spell it correctly and then find the page that you miss half the game. And I saw people at the Arizona Fall League that had our prospect handbooks at games. So I know it is something that people do. So I thought that's really beneficial. You can get that now. And it has, top 30s for all 30 all 30 organizations, plus an additional 10 in each organization now that we list in the book. They're just names with 2-sentence skinnies on the next 10 guys, so sort of 31 through 40. Got a ton of other work that's been coming out. I've been doing a lot of analytical dives. I did best pitches within the top 100, where I broke down different pitch mixes and I highlighted different pitch mixes. I highlighted some of the best fastballs, some of the best sliders, curveballs, changeups. And now I'm going through and I'm looking at some of the best pitches outside the top 100. So I just released a best fastballs outside the top 100 last Thursday. And then earlier today on Tuesday, I released best sliders outside the top 100. So just taking 5 players in each pitch type, discussing some guys that need a little more shine, that are throwing something that's really interesting. And I try to sort of touch all levels in the minors. I'll talk about some relief-only guys, some starters, some bigger name prospects, and former first or second round picks, and some other guys that might be like Brandon Walter from the Red Sox. He's a former 26 rounder out of Delaware or something. So try to run the gamut. But looking forward to getting back to the park. We're going to be covering minor league spring training. In a couple of weeks, I'll be down actually at Gary Dean. Hopefully there'll be some real spring games going at that point. I highly doubt it, but we'll see.
So definitely check out Geoff's work if for some reason you are not doing so already. Like I said originally, Guy is absolute best in the business. Geoff, again, can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us, my man. Hopefully your son will be able to get his laundry done now that you're wrapping this up. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in. And let's see here. Next week, we are scheduled for Corbin Young. So hopefully our TGFBI draft is done by then, so he can't try to snipe me, because I know that son of a bitch will do that. Once again, Geoff, thank you so much. And and we will see everybody next week.
Thanks a lot.
See you guys.